Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, and this is Pirate Radio. And tonight, we're going to pile on SIG. For those of you who are not aware, SIG Sauer has had some issues here in the recent years, ever since they released their pistol, their P320, and there's been, I don't know even what to call it, rumors, evidence, lore, stories of not even negligent discharges, but uncommanded discharges of the pistol. I don't own a SIG P320. So before I get deep into it, Ian from Forgotten Weapons has a great video on this, actually a few videos on this topic. Let's also talk about one of the things that really spurred this here recently was a death of a United States airman that was blamed on the P320 that was holstered and it went off, blah, blah, blah. It turns out that story was a little bit different than what we were told initially. More evidence came out, what have you, but basically it was not the P320's fault of a uncommanded discharge or anything like that. But that being said, SIG felt the need to respond. And I can understand why SIG felt the need to respond when you have a death of a serviceman and it's possibly your fault. And that's kind of where the problem really begins. And let's just go ahead and show you SIG's response here. We will produce and share a screen. It's going to take a little minute, but if you're not watching live or watching later on, I'm going to read all of this to you. There we go. Let's go full screen so everybody can see this. So, in the wake of this, SIG released a statement. I forget exactly when the shooting was, but they released a statement on their official Twitter at SIG Sauer Inc. So they posted a picture, the truth about the P320. The caption on the tweet says, "The P320, it ends today." In which they come down, they issue a statement, SIG Sauer, "The P320 cannot, in all caps, under any circumstances, discharge without a trigger pull. That is a fact." All right. "The allegations against the P320 are nothing more than individuals seeking to profit or avoid a personal responsibility. Recently, anti-gun groups, members of the mainstream media, trial attorneys, and other uninformed and agenda-driven parties have launched attacks on one of SIG Sauer's most trusted, most tested, and most popular products, the P320 pistol. In all cases, these individuals have an ulterior motive behind their baseless allegations that the P320 can fire without a trigger pull. They have no evidence, no data, no empirical testing to support any of their claims. They instead choose to misrepresent clear, negligent discharges as, quote, design problem, or, quote, a design problem." It continues on and says, "In the decades since its introduction, the P320 has undergone the most rigorous testing and evaluation of any firearm by military and law enforcement agencies around the world. It consistently delivers a proven record of performance and reliability through state-of-the-art engineering." I'll just power through that. "And documented quality control at every stage of its production. Claims that unintended discharges are anything more than negligent handling and or manufactured lies to support an anti-gun, anti-SIG agenda are false. Furthermore, lawsuits claiming that the P320 is capable of firing without the trigger being pulled have been dismissed in courtrooms around the country," which is fact. "In addition, multiple plaintiffs, so-called experts, have conceded, or multiple plaintiffs' so-called experts have conceded it is not possible for the P320 to discharge unless the trigger is fully actuated." In closing, "The rhetoric is high and we can no longer stay silent while lawsuits run their course, and clickbait farming, engagement hacking grifters That's a steep accusation. Continued their campaign to hijack the truth for profit. Do I fall under engagement hacking grifters now? I don't get paid for this, so probably not. Anyway, continues. Enough is enough. From the courts of law to the court of public opinion, we will combat the lies and misinformation with the truth. SIG Sauer stands behind the quality, safety, and design of all of our products, especially the P320. Feels like you didn't really have to reiterate the P320 right there if you're behind all of our products. Anyway, I digress. Industry, take notice. What's happening today to SIG Sauer with the anti-gun mob and their lawfare tactics will happen tomorrow at another firearms manufacturer and then another. Today, for SIG Sauer, it ends. Well, it didn't end, SIG Sauer. It really didn't end, and it's not going to end. This whole thing that the knock on the P320 is coming from like anti-gun groups is just really not accurate. I'm sure there are anti-gun groups that are coming at you. Anti-gun groups kind of exist to go after gun manufacturers. But the thing about an anti-gun group is they don't discriminate in that aspect. They hate all gun manufacturers equally because they hate all of us equally. You know, I mean, it's kind of like they're playing it even, if you will. So I didn't like that response. A lot of people didn't like that response. If you saw the comments there when I was sharing it on the screen, a bunch of people really did not like that response. One of the things that really sticks out, and I didn't read this before, or I read this before, but it's been a couple of days ago, and I should have taken notes of some of it. Let me go ahead and share this again. Producing. And we go back and add the stage, and there it is. So one of the things that stood out to me was the most rigorous testing and evaluation of any firearm, military law enforcement range, consistently track performance, reliability through state-of-the-art engineering, and documented quality control at every stage of its production. The problem with that statement is you guys did issue a voluntary recall because it was not drop safe when it was initially introduced. That's a problem. That's a big problem. Is that your state-of-the-art engineering and documented quality control at every stage of its production? I mean, that's just kind of nonsense. You know, they mentioned from the courts of the law to the public opinion, we will combat the lies and blah, blah, blah. Courts are not necessarily a problem. They've lost, I believe, 2 court cases. Ian goes over this in his video, and I got it from him. I believe they've lost 2 court cases, but the reason they lost the court cases was it was not of negligence. It was more of like, I think they were civil cases in which the jury or the experts or whomever was deciding in those instances said, well, it didn't like fail where you designed it. It's just you should have had an additional safety or trigger safety on it. Now, that's really going outside the pale. I'm sure those were in some very not friendly courts, but I digress. So the issue here is uncommanded discharge. And there's any number of theories out there. I've seen miniguns over the years, whether it's been on social media or in person, where someone has claimed, you know, it was an out-of-battery discharge or it was in-battery discharge and the gun blew up and it exploded. And then you look at the gun and, like, I mean, it's an exploded gun, so it is that. But you look at it and you go, well, that's an aftermarket barrel. That's an aftermarket. And so now it's like, and I don't want to say that those people are just stupid and didn't do the work right. But, you know, once you start modifying something, there's issues there, okay? And the other part of it is, if there's issues there from the beginning, you're exacerbating those issues from the manufacturer. So with their state-of-the-art engineering, you might have made it worse, you know, not intentionally. You unintentionally made it quite a bit worse by adding your aftermarket trigger, you know, whatever you did. That's not necessarily your fault. You're kind of all to blame. Well, not really, but we kind of know when we start modifying firearms that there's the trade-off. There's no solutions, just trade-offs. If you want a lighter trigger pull, where you're going to have a lighter trigger pull, and the odds of you having a negligent discharge, whether it's reholstering or what have you, high stress situation, they go up a little bit over something that is a if you have a 1.5 pound, 2 pound trigger somewhere in that neighborhood, if you drop that down from a 5 to 6 pound or even a 10 pound trigger, something like that, it kind of comes with the territory. Okay, need a lot more practice, figure out where the brakes are, where the wall is, where the reset is, any number of things. But those are things you should understand if you're replacing triggers in firearms. Anyway, let's get back to the SIG. I think one of the things I want to show here is kind of how the SIG P320 operates. This is probably best illustrated if we start with kind of the Glock system as our baseline, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. I'm going to disassemble a couple of pistols here. So if we start with Glock as our baseline of how a striker-fired pistol should operate, it's going to be kind of hard to see on this shitty camera. But anyway, so this is the internals. This is a slide. This is a dagger slide, but it's a Glock clone. It's the same thing. So you have your striker right here. So as you pull the trigger of a Glock-style pistol, part of that trigger pull is going to pull the striker back. It's going to get to the wall and then release, whack, and we hit the back of the bullet, which is down here in our barrel. So we're going to strike the back of the bullet, igniting the primer, boom, goes bang, all of that. The thing that is, so you have multiple safeties within a Glock system. One is this little plunger right here. Okay, that's one of your safeties. The other safety is the trigger itself with our little trigger dongle. So you can't pull the trigger without depressing that guy. So you have a trigger safety. You have an unloaded, unsprung, just sitting there firing pin or striker. This is not under any pressure right now. It kind of moves, wiggles around a little bit, and that is part of it. So you have your various safeties like so. So if we take that as our baseline, so there's your, just to show you that the trigger won't depress. I'm just pushing on the edges. It will not depress unless you hit the trigger bar there. Bang. Okay. So if we take that as our baseline, remember, that is an unsprung striker. This is how the SIG P320 striker system is set up when it's in battery, cocked and locked and ready to go, right? So you do not have a trigger bar. Excuse me, you do have a trigger bar. You don't have a trigger safety. You don't have the little dongle in there, anything like that. You have a pre-cocked, under tension firing pin striker or striker pin. You can see that the spring is already under tension as it sets in battery. They did this to give you a better trigger pull over their competitors, which is fine. Although the trigger safety does not really make a bad trigger pull. We go to our next one here. This is what it looks like when it fires. It has been released and is now firing. And now you see the spring, bang, releasing all of its force, untensioning to fire the round. That's fine. So you have, inside of the SIG here, you have multiple safeties, fail safes, if you will. If you look at the little green piece here, this is your sear notch. So the sear is this piece right here that is connected to your striker firing pin and firing spring. That sear is held under tension back here, and as you pull the trigger, if I go back one, go back two, as you pull the red trigger, the blue trigger bar is going to move forward. This hinge is going to pull forward, which is going to pull your trigger bar forward, which is then going to pull this yellow piece backwards. And as you pull the yellow piece backwards, it's going to, let me go back, it's going to push this up. This is another supposed firing pin safety here, that the firing pin will not go off until this is pushed upward, which you'll see in the next one. It will push up and then rock back down. With this, the sear back here is supposed to have a primary sear notch within a sear catch. So this was one of their fixes when it was not drop safe, was to do this. And the reason that the SIG P320 was not drop safe is that they had too much mass sitting back there. So what happens when you drop a pistol, and the Glock is drop safe as well, because again, we have our trigger safety. When you drop a pistol, you drop it downward, boom, okay? Take another slide here. So as you drop it on its back, as the pistol comes down and hits its back, if the striker is too heavy and has enough weight to just come back, just enough, you get this with like hammer-fired pistols a lot, or used to. So if this comes backwards, if it has enough inertia, enough weight that as this falls down and hits and strikes the ground, this firing pin or striker can fall backwards, and then as it rebounds and come forward, striking the bullet and firing. Now, that was one of the things they definitely had to fix through their fantastic engineering, right? I don't know what you technically categorize a drop. Is that a negligent discharge? Is that an unintended discharge? Doesn't really matter, but the pistol goes off, everybody jumps, and hopefully no one gets hit. What I was talking about when you go in and you start changing out triggers to something, and that you might be exacerbating a problem, is that if you have, one of the terms that we need to understand is what's called tolerance stacking. And I'll put this graphic back up here. So, put the one I want up there. So when you take all of these little pieces here in the back side of this, from the trigger bar to any number of the different sear mechanisms and what have you, all of these little pieces here, right? Even including the striker itself, all of these little pieces have some sort of tolerance from piece to piece to piece to piece. So if you make 1 million striker bars or firing pins, all 1 million of those pins are going to be somewhat slightly different. And what I mean is that they're going to look the same, but once you start putting the calipers on them and things like that, you're going to find little differences between, whether it's 1/1000th of an inch or 10,000th of an inch, you're going to find little differences between the machining or the metal injection molding or whatever it is. You're going to find little differences. Let's say it's all machined. Even the best machinists in the world cannot replicate to the, finest degree, piece to piece to piece to piece, which is fine. The problem the SIG has had is they've used metal injection molding parts. So this is not a machined part. This is a made part. It's basically like hot metal poured into a mold, blah, blah, blah. It's fine. The pieces hold up. The problem comes in is that it's a less precise method than machining it. It's also cheaper. So as you get these different tolerances, you see all of these pieces in the back side of this, which a Glock style pistol does not have all of those mechanisms back there, at least not in the detail like this. Once you have the tolerances off on the yellow piece, on the red piece, on the green piece, and then on this, you stack all of those tolerances, and it's not tight enough to hold itself together under the specific instance in which you tested your original set of pistols for. So that's a problem. So the main reason for this podcast and subsequent video that I'm going to do for the channel is I bought trying to reassemble it. Good Lord. There we go. I bought a SIG P365X a few years ago. I like the feel of it. I like the look of it. It's very compact, 12-round standard flush fit magazine, steel magazines. I like that. Striker fired pistol. Looks cool. Flat face trigger. Replaceable sights. You can put a red dot on it. I didn't do that, obviously. Obviously chambered in 9mm. Pretty lightweight. And again, the ergonomics on it. I don't have huge hands, but I have large enough hands. They fit on it. Feels good. All those things. So I bought the P365X. The front rail there is garbage. So FU SIG for doing some proprietary rail there. Must be more of that, fine engineering, state of the art. Anyway, but it had a bunch of features that I like. Shoots well. The trigger on this is not good. But the point of this is, I used to carry this, but I used to carry from a 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock position on my hip, basically. And then I decided I wanted to carry appendix in the waistband, which, to reiterate yet again, you cannot carry appendix in the waistband without breaking 1, possibly 2 of the 4 rules of firearm safety. But that's okay, so long as you understand what you're doing. So, I wanted to carry appendix in the waistband, and around that time, the P320 was really catching some heat for the unintended discharges. And I was like, nah, I don't believe that, blah, blah, blah. I think it's, because initially, the Glock pistol, when it first came out, had a reputation for being unsafe because the departments that adopted this pistol went from 10-pound triggered revolvers. Now, the revolvers are much bigger than this, but this still has pretty much a 10-pound revolver trigger. That's a stout trigger. Okay? What was happening was, and thank you to my boy Tommy Face on Fire for reminding me of this and posting it this week. Probably should put that up here, but anyway. What they were doing was they were used to that 10-pound trigger pull of the revolver, so they were staging their finger on it. And one of the things you can do with a revolver is you can stage the trigger. You can get good enough where you can stage the trigger on it, so when you come up, you can actually have a slightly less trigger pull, and that's advantageous because if you just pull this out and then come forward and you have to shoot, it's about a tenth of a second, a half second longer. But also, the odds of you going from a position where you're on target under high stress situation where maybe your grip is a little bit different because, again, it's high stress situation. Maybe you're a little unclean coming out of your holster, what have you. You can squeeze one off kind of to the right, to the left if you're left-handed, if your trigger finger's in the wrong spot. So what they would do is, as they would train and they would basically have it pre-staged about halfway. So when they came up, bang. Well, the problem is when you switch to a striker fired like this, a Glock has about a 5.5-pound trigger. With your pre-stage, I'm at the wall right there. To get to the wall and this is a cleaned up trigger on this Smith & Wesson 340 PD, by the way. This is a really nice trigger. So as you come to the wall, it just goes like bang, right? But there's a lot of tension at first, and then it goes. The tension on the Glock, similar to that, comes right at the end. So if you pre-stage it, you fired it. So what they were doing is, as they were drawing out of the holster, they were firing the pistols. So that wasn't a Glock problem. That was a training problem. That was an officer problem. Okay? So, Glock had that reputation unearned, and they've since overcome that reputation. But the problem I'm having with SIG and why I switched, why I won't carry this appendix in the waistband, is because one is the response, which I read before, that basically everyone's a liar. There's no problem, even though there was a problem. You guys, offer to fix it. Now, it wasn't a mandatory recall. It's a voluntary recall. But you knew there was a problem, and you issued a recall, and bang, you were going to fix it. And you did fix pistols of people who sent them in. The problem came in that response of No, there's no problem. You guys are full of shit. There is a problem. I think the biggest problem, and this is what's hurting their reputation, is that they don't know what the problem is. And if they do know what the problem is and they're just not fixing it and they're lying about it, that's even worse. But I digress. So this is, at the time, I think I paid $600, maybe $650, don't know. Went to the local gun shop, overpaid for it. That much I can attest to. But this is similar to the P320 in a lot of ways, but it's also vastly different. This pistol does not have a staged striker. So the striker on this pistol is not under tension as it sets. And it does have a striker safety right there. So I have to depress that, which happens when you pull the trigger. You have to depress that, and then the striker now can freely come backwards under heavy tension, and it doesn't have to come back as far as like the Glock does, so it gets a little better trigger pull, trigger feel to it. And I let it go, and now I cannot pull it back very easily. So it gets stuck there anyway. And there we go. But this blocks part of the trigger mechanism. So this has to push up, this has to come back, all of that fun stuff. But it's not under tension. It's not staged. It's not a staged striker. So I thought, okay, this is completely different. Shouldn't be an issue because it's a completely different operating system. And then there were videos of 365s out there, which had been modified, mind you, in which people were able to, like, so they would, what was it? They would fire, pistol would fire and reset, and then they would, like, wiggle it, and it would bang, and it would go off again. Those were modified pistols from what I could tell. The problem comes in is this, okay? See if I can get it to where you can hear this. This has a fire control unit, which means the serialized part is the fire control unit, which includes the trigger, which can be removed and put into a different pistol lower. So I could have make a bigger pistol out of this with the corresponding slide and whatnot. I could put it into like a metal pistol frame or something like that, or something with different grips, what have you. So the fire control unit can come out of this and go into a different pistol. That's fine. I don't really have any problem with that, other than no one ever fucking asked for it, and it's a non-feature, but I digress. See if you can hear this. Hopefully you could hear that wiggle, and I'll show it to you if you couldn't hear it. So I'm holding the recoil spring, the front of the recoil spring. I have my thumb on it and my thumb on the back side. It moves. Why does it move? Why does it make that sound? There's no mag in it. You take the Glock, and this thing is a Franken Glock. No movement. No movement. Obviously, no movement out of the revolver. So, I replaced my summer. So, this is the winter carry, Glock 19 clone. This was the warm weather carry because it's a lot more concealable than the Glock, obviously. It's a lot smaller. This got replaced by the FUD Special, the Smith & Wesson 340 PD, M&P 340 PD, I believe, 357 Magnum 5-shot revolver. Nothing goes wrong as far as like negligent discharge or anything like that with the revolver. Real long trigger pull. Not pleasant to shoot 357 out of this all day, by the way. I'll be the first to admit. But this is highly concealable. Very lightweight. It's about the same size, actually, as the P365. So there's not a huge change there. I have less rounds, but it's easy to carry, and it's not going to go off and blow my goddamn dick off. So there's that. And that's why I changed, is because I don't trust SIG Sauer anymore. I don't trust what they say. I don't trust their engineers. And I will tell you that I have now upgraded my summer carry to the Canik Mete MC9, which also does not wiggle. or anything like that. It has a trigger safety, so I cannot pull the trigger without depressing that little red guy there. Put it in battery and show you that it doesn't wiggle. It has decent sights on it. It has a cocked, that you're in battery, a cocked, I don't know if you can see that, but shows that your striker is cocked. But the thing is that it's the same mechanism pretty much. As a Glock. It is an unsprung firing pin or striker mechanism. So I mean, you have to pull it all the way back. It does look to be a little more substantial, but it's a very heavy spring in there. These are drop safe. It's got a number of other features that I like with it. I don't like that it's from Turkey or whatever the fuck they call themselves now. But you know what? Plenty of different features. We have a actual usable Picatinny rail up front. Thank you, Canik. You have decent texturing here, which fine with me. Decent set of sights. You do have a red dot capable slide there, which, by the way, I can put a red dot on here and I don't lose my rear sight, unlike the SIG, in which if I want to put a red dot on there, I lose my rear sight. So don't understand that I have to give up backup sights for your fucking pistol that I paid more money for. And it holds 12 rounds with a 15-round extended mag that comes with it. Does everything I want it to do. And it won't blow my goddamn dick off because some engineer doesn't want to, say that their pistol is unsafe. And the thing that's crazy to me about SIG is they talk about their innovation and they talk about their manufacturing capabilities and their state-of-the-art engineering and this, that, and the other. And if you go and look at like the next generation squad weapon, which that's a whole nother subject that we need to get into, and we probably will. But if you look at their next generation squad weapon, it's just a play on the AR-18 operating system, which is fine. And SIG's been using that with the MCX Spear and some other rifles. They've been messing with the AR-18 system, which is a great system. It's Eugene Stoner, it's captive recoil springs instead of the buffer tube with the buffer spring in it. Probably should have caught on more than it did, but it didn't for whatever reason. And SIG kind of resurrected it and made it mainstream. And they have some great products, albeit very high end and fancy. They have some great products that come with it. And I don't want to say, I'm not just trying to pile on like all of SIG's products. They make really good rifles. They make really good ARs. I have one of their 5.16 uppers with the quad rail on it. That is a great fucking upper. I love that upper. Now that we're able to submit our own paperwork, I'm going to build up, probably do an SBR that guy, and make a badass rifle. But that's a really good rifle. Seems to be pretty accurate. I really like that upper, I should say. I guess I don't have the full rifle. But anyway, the point is, SIG makes great products, and SIG can engineer really good products. Look at the P226, the 229s, the 210 from back in the day, which they reissued. They make a really good 1911. The thing, there was a time where I was going to buy a P320. I think it was the X Carry when it came out. And I kept looking at it, and I think the P320, especially in some different variations, is a very good-looking pistol. I like the way it looks. I like, that you can do different things with it. You can get in different colors, what have you. I just never really saw the value in that pistol over something else. And I know that sounds stupid when I went and bought a P365, but really at the time, especially when the 365 came out, but this is the X. And when the X came out, this was like the difference between, so this is like buying the P365 with an XL grip. So you still have the very micro compactness, I guess, of the 365 slide, but the grip of a XL. So it was blending both worlds, which is a natural progression. So what that did is it gave you more capacity in the mag well. I think it's an extra 2 rounds, what have you. Just fine. And that's what I was looking for at the time. That's what I got at the time. I didn't know I was buying, potentially the like scapegoat item. Um, if it wasn't for this fire control unit and the wiggle, the other thing is like when you go to pull the trigger, that I don't like that. Like my trigger take up should just be trigger take up, not my slide and fire control unit making a sound. And by the way, the trigger leaves a lot to be desired, even for a goddamn striker fire. Like, is the Canic a great trigger? No. But it ain't bad. It's in the Glock realm. Great triggers and striker fires are kind of oxymoronic. There's just good triggers in those. But let's something's going on at SIG. I don't know what it is. And the reason I say that is because the next generation squad weapon is a dumpster fire, just like waiting to happen, waiting for a place to go. If you're not familiar with the NGSW weapon, I'm going to share this on the screen, theoretically, because we're producing. So the next generation squad weapon, I'll go full screen here. So the Army is looking for their next generation squad weapon. What does that mean? They're looking for a replacement for the M4. The M4 is just an updated version of M16, different features, shorter barrel, what have you. Anyway, they're trying to get away from the M4 and the M16 and the AR platform itself, or the AR operating system, and get away from the 5.56 round or 223 round. This came from engagements that happened in Afghanistan on the mountainous terrain, where you're getting engagements of Taliban and resistance fighters, Al-Qaeda, at distances of like 400 yards or more. The 5.56 does not shine in a 400-yard or plus engagement. I understand that. I wasn't there, but I can read, and I understand ballistically that's not what you want at 400 yards or more, especially in a combat situation. You prefer a 30 caliber cartridge. This rifle and weapon system is pretty much doomed to fail just from the idea of using a 6.8 by 51 millimeter round. That is a hybrid ammunition. What does that mean? Well, the hybrid ammunition means it's under such great pressures that the casing could not be all brass because it couldn't handle the pressure and would explode inside the chamber. So now they have to use a proprietary cartridge that has two different metals just to hold up to the pressures. Now, every gun guy on planet Earth understands that when you have chamber pressure goes up, life of weapon goes down, because you're putting strain on all of the parts that have to deal with that pressure. The barrel won't last as long. The recoil parts won't last as long. And speaking of recoil, you get a lot more of it. The other thing is, if this is going to be your squad weapon in its different variations, now, the squad machine gun, the LMG, the light machine gun, that's something to really pursue. But to take this whole thing, put it together as one great package, this rifle just on its own weighs like 3 pounds or 4 pounds more than an M4. Once you factor in ammunition, you're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 pounds more with a loadout just on your ammo, and you have less ammo. We've had 7.62 by 51 or 308 Winchester for decades. We've used it. It's in use right now. There are military units all over the globe, United States military units, using it. I don't understand how this was the rifle that got chosen. I've heard so many bad things about it. I've heard so much stuff about it, most of which is not good. Why you would take... So if you take Army infantry And this is no dig at anyone who has been in the Army Infantry or currently in the Army Infantry or is going to be in the Army Infantry. But you're talking about 18, 19-year-old kids, adults, I guess, soldiers now, men and women at this point. That's a different story. And I have to hand you a rifle, train you on said rifle, train you well enough to go into combat and use the rifle so you don't die or the person next to you does not die. If we're going to talk about a high-powered, somewhere in the neighborhood, if I remember correctly, it's something like 75,000 PSI or something like that new round is going to generate. That's a big bang. That's a big pushback, okay? That's before we get into the costs of all this, but you're talking about a heavier rifle, which is harder to hold, with even more recoil, and the rifle doesn't absorb the recoil like you would think being a heavier rifle, because when you're talking about M4s and ARs, they're not heavy rifles, but the rifle round is not a big firing, recoiling, heavy recoiling rifle. If you want to shoot a big cartridge and have less recoil, you need to be shooting something like one of these, either that infield here, the Mosin Nagant here, or the Mauser here, which are shooting 30 caliber full power cartridges downrange. These are 8, 9, 10 pound rifles of iron and wood shooting a very powerful cartridge, which, yeah, you do get some recoil and you feel it, but it handles it because it's so heavy. Again, what is the Clint Smith saying? When you get in a gunfight, you can't have a big enough gun. When you're carrying a gun, it can't be small enough. And when you start hiking with the gun, you'll start peeling shit off of it like you're burning up in the desert. Yeah. If the infantry just showed up, set up on some berms and had a gunfight, that's one thing. They got to move with this shit. So you're taking 18, 19-year-olds, you're trying to train them on a heavy rifle with more recoil, with a larger projectile that weighs more, and now you're going to have them rucking around with more weight, which means they're going to have to, I don't know, adjust what's in the ruck in the pack and carry less food or supplies just so they can carry the ammo. None of this makes sense. None of this. If we're talking like specialized forces, like, SOCOM forces, special operations guys, that they operate off a forward operating base. They go out, do hits, come back. They're not out in the field. They're not hiking. They're not rucking across, days long, weeks long worth of just moving shit. They're just doing hitters. That's a different story. They wouldn't want this rifle anyway because that giant bastard, and they don't want the weight of it either. So none of this makes sense. So it makes you wonder what the hell is going on. SIG got the P320 became the sidearm of like everyone except the Marines, and I think the Marines now are carrying it. It's called the M17 and I think the M18. Depends on what branch you're in, which pistol you get. But that replaced the Beretta, which is a great pistol. I don't care what QP says. The Beretta M9 is a fantastic pistol. The 92 FS, the M9, that is a great pistol. Got replaced by shit. So you get that contract. So I guess you have the inside track to the next contract. I would have just stuck with the M4. Like, I really don't even know. The other part is, like, this plays into the whole AR-18 operating system where, but the stock folds over on the on that next generation squad weapon from SIG. It's like, yeah, but there again, you're talking about captive recoil springs within the upper receiver with a much bigger round. Maybe you want a giant recoil spring known as a buffer with a buffer spring and buffer tube to manage that recoil. I think the guns are going to just destroy themselves. I don't think this is viable, even though it appears that the Army has adopted the SIG as the next generation squad weapon. This may not last. This might be like the M14, where it has one of the shortest service lives ever in the United States military. And to me, this is pointing towards bigger problems. And I know all of us, American loving, pro America guys were super happy when, SIG, it was a German company, when they shut down operations in Germany because it just became too hard to operate, from what I understand. And they basically are now an American company, and they make pretty much everything, and R&D happens here in the United States. So many of us were like, yeah, F Germany, we love guns and we do that. I think the quality went down. I think the oversight stopped. I think they started chasing bottom lines, and they started chasing military contracts, and they just let the guys here in the United States run buck wild, and they did what they're going to do, and they're going to make money. And I'll be damned if the customer, who cares what they think? We'll just play catch up. We'll release these products. We've done some R&D. We're going to release this new pistol or this new rifle, and we know it's not to what the SIG standard used to be, with like P226s and P210s and all of those things. But they're just going to, they're just going to kind of play catch up, and they're not dangerous by any stretch of the imagination, I wouldn't say, but they're just not the quality that we've come to know and expect from a SIG, much like you kind of expect from like an HK. And we used to expect from Colt before they went bankrupt and got bought by CZ. But you expect a certain level of R&D and quality and machining and all of that. You definitely don't expect this shit. And that really comes to one of the biggest points of this whole thing, is like, you have to sit there and you have to ask yourself, okay, I've done videos about, picking out a pistol, your first CCW, or maybe just your first firearm overall, your first pistol. And one of the things that I cannot stress enough is the Thomas Sowell quote of, "There are no solutions, only trade-offs." And that is accurate for most things in life. One of the things, if you're going to spend, in essence, $200 more for this SIG over this Canic, okay? This needs to do something that the Canic does not do, all right? What is it that the 365 does? Now, when it came out, it did something that no one else did, and it gave you 12 rounds out of a micro compact. Okay, those days are over. Okay, so somebody tell me what the 365 does or the 320 does that Glock doesn't do, that Canic doesn't do, that Smith & Wesson doesn't do, other than possibly create a situation through bad engineering, I don't care about my customer / any number of other things that could lead to a unwarranted discharge or uncommanded discharge or a negligent discharge. That was the main driving factor of switching from this pistol to the revolver and now to the Canic, is no one can tell me what the SIG product does that another product doesn't do. The quality is less. I do remember at the first time feeling this pistol, and actually not just this one, but when the first 365s came out, I remember feeling the polymer there, and I was like, man, that seems really thin. I don't know. Like, it just seemed thin. I was used to Glocks, where you grab a Glock and it seems a little bulky and chunky, and you're like, well, that's fine. That just means there's a bunch of polymer, and it's, that maybe there's a little bit too much polymer, but it creates rigidity and strength, and that's fine. That's a good thing. But no one can tell me what the SIG product does that no other product does. They made all these concessions to have a quote-unquote better trigger pull out of the P320, and it still sucks. Like, it's not a great trigger pull by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe that's because I've shot hammer-fired pistols before, and I understand what a real great pistol trigger can be, or even, high-end revolvers. Double action revolver, single action revolver, where you just cock the hammer and it just goes. The thing is like the old school guns, the 1911s and the revolvers, the single action or even double action, single action revolvers, those guys knew trigger pulls, and those trigger pulls are fucking fantastic. If you work them, man, are those great trigger pulls. And no striker fired pistol on planet Earth can come close to a really nice, I don't care what the trigger is. It's like bullpups versus regular rifles. The greatest bullpup on planet Earth comes nowhere near, and I'll keep it to semi-autos. The greatest bullpup trigger on planet Earth, the greatest bullpup with the greatest trigger, comes nowhere near like a $100 trigger in an AR. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. It can't. The mechanics don't allow it. Now, bullpups and striker-fired pistols offer some other advantages over their better triggered competitors. If we take pistols, like one of the reasons Glock changed the game is it's very simple, it's very easy, it's high capacity, it's easy to maintain, it has a bunch of safety features. Is this a better pistol than a 1911? No, especially at the time when 1911s were either 7 or 8 rounds in the magazine, and the compact version, the G19, the Glock 19, came with 15 rounds. If you had the G17, I think it was 18 rounds, 17, 18 rounds. Standard, you had double the rounds in a 1911, which weighed more. And you could get a Glock. 9mm had more rounds in it. Yeah, are they as powerful as a 45 ACP? No. But you got a hell of a lot of them, and you got a more reliable pistol. Let's be honest, too. When you get into that high-end shit, you start getting into some very, very finicky pistols that really need a whole lot of maintenance because it's tight tolerances. And that's the other thing. This does not have tight tolerances. This is good enough, just above good enough to do what you need it to do, when you need it to do it, and how you need it to do it. Not the greatest trigger? No. Not the finest tolerances? No. Not the prettiest pistol? No. But it just does everything that you need it to do when you need it to do it. A 1911 is a good-looking pistol. Looks way better than this damn thing. But a 1911 weighs more, it shoots a shitty caliber, and it's finicky. They're finicky. It's, not a big deal, but something like a Glock versus a 1911, the 1911 has a break-in period, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 800 to 1,000 rounds before you really get that dude humming. A Glock break-in period is like now. Like, it's broke in. Just start shooting the fucking thing. Just find the best ammo for you that works best with a pistol, which is most ammos. Just find one that doesn't jam up, and you're good to go. And, that's the thing is, like, you get back to the SIG. Well, what does a SIG do that Glock doesn't do? I don't know. Oh, it has a fire control unit in it that you can move around to different pistol grips and frames. I don't give a shit. That's a non-feature to me. That's a non-feature at all. Because if I take the fire control group out and I want to move it to a bigger frame, well, now I have to buy an entire slide assembly. Why didn't I just buy another pistol? It's going to be the same price. Okay, so I don't have to do a 4473. Great. Now I have all these other parts that I have to fucking keep up. What am I supposed to just swap back and forth? Like, during the week, I carry the micro compact, and on the weekend, I go to competition, and I have, like, it just makes zero sense. I don't know. Anyway, I think that's pretty much all I had on why I switched from my SIG to now a Canic. But I just don't trust SIG anymore. I don't trust their PR. I don't trust their engineering. It looks to me like they're cutting corners, which is leading to, issues. Time will tell. Maybe there isn't some dire issue with the P320. But I can tell you this. You can find them pretty affordable on the secondary market. That much I know. Let's see here. Well, there is an article. That I wanted to go over. So, in the vein of the gun world, and I will try to tie this together of how this actually matters here. We'll share the screen. So, This is an article from Inc.com, like INC, Inc.com. There it goes. Processing. Jesus Christ. Just thinking about it. Yay! All right, let's go full screen. In celebration, we'll go full screen. So, Big Tech confirms DHS subpoenas Meta and Google users targeted over anti-ICE posts. Major tech firms acknowledge they have complied with DHS subpoenas aiming to ID anti-ICE protesters. So, Google, Meta, and Reddit now acknowledge they have complied with Department of Homeland Security subpoenas seeking to identify users who have denounced immigration and customs enforcement. I should probably start by saying I don't know what Inc.com is. It's like the first time I've ever read any article on their website. I don't know if they lean a certain way. I read this article once. It didn't strike me that it was leaning left, right, or anywhere else, but I digress. So, they go on to say, hundreds of administrative subpoenas issued by DHS, not judges. I'm not a lawyer, but that seems wrong. Wrong of DHS, not the article. Anyway, reportedly have been served in major tech companies as DHS attempts to crack down on critics of ICE deployments in cities nationwide. The subpoenas, once reserved for dealing with time-sensitive crises like child abductions, appear to be aimed at unmasking account holders who have criticized ICE or pointed out locations where ICE agents are stationed. Okay. This is not about ICE to me. This is about what happens. This is government overreach, obviously. This pertains to us because, as I talked about, I believe, last week, when the ATF has a backdoor registry of gun owners and ownership and firearms and serial numbers and calibers and all of that, this is the same beast, okay? I know DHS and ATF are not connected technically, but they're both government asshole overlords. So, the point of this is they are, and I will link to this in the description of the video if you want to go read this article for yourself over at inc.com. The point is that if they do this then, they will do this later, okay? So the us versus them people of the world, when you go, well, this is fine because I support ICE and those people are targeting ICE and I want them to be found and arrested and prosecuted and what have you. I understand your sentiment. You need to understand that any power used today will be used tomorrow, and when the other guy is in power and when the them and the they are in power, they're going to use this against you. So unless you're willing to use this full authority to crush the other side completely, this is nothing more than something that's going to fuck you tomorrow that's fucking your friend today. Okay? I don't know why this is so hard to understand, that this kind of like anarcho-tyranny that we're living through currently is going to come back to bite us all. And the other side, the left, the rabid leftists have shown no problem with coming after all firearms. You have legislation in, I believe, California that may have passed, actually, and I'm pretty sure it's already passed in New York, banning basically 3D printers, or at least registration of 3D printers. And now you're talking about the state of California is talking about outlawing the code and this and that, and they're going to come after code for printing 3D weapons and 3D lowers and this, that, or the other. You know, if the code's out there and there's some sort of forum, look, I don't know that much about the whole 3D printing thing. I understand what 3D printing is, but when it comes to like the code and all of those downloadable files, I fucking old man Nolan here. Like, I don't know. You're bringing me about Metamucil. Like, I'm 2 world wars at that point. Like, I just really, I'm out of that loop. It just doesn't interest me. Like, more power to you guys. You make great shit. It's cool as hell, and keep posting it. Those 3D things you guys are innovating to freedom, if you will. And I love seeing it. It's just not, I'm just not into it. That's no shade at you guys. But this is going to be, when you start registering a 3D printer, you're going to start chasing down source code. That means you're going to start monitoring where you get the code, whether that's forums, Reddit, wherever that is, the catalog or whatever those things are. Those things are now not only monitored, now they have a predicate for issuing some sort of subpoena to get the actual records from the company, and they're going to have to comply, or will comply, obviously, with that. And now they're going to come to your door and kill your fucking dog because you 3D printed a Glock lower. You know, the ATF likes to shoot dogs. So, yeah, I know we all want ICE to do the job and do everything, and we don't want them to get hurt or attacked, and especially coordinated attacks. But you got to play this even. You can't have that being a thing. And so we should be against this. And I don't care that it's our guy in there or, you know, dog killing lady with good hair. This cannot stand. This is wrong. I don't like this at all. So, fuck Christy Nome. Not literally, like figuratively, like the bad kind of fuck. Anyway. So yeah. Fuck Department of Homeland Security. I don't even understand. The Department of Homeland Security. Isn't that our job? Isn't that what we do? I don't know. Anyway. Stay vigilant on that stuff, guys and gals. I know it's hard to when the other side that you don't like and we shouldn't like, and the commies get their comeuppance, or commie adjacents get their comeuppance, and they get, you know, cracked down. It's very easy to cheer that because, you know, they're against us. But the thing is like, you got to wield power or not wield power or whatever, because they're going to wield power. So if you're not like fully committed to wielding the power, which you're obviously not because you haven't been rounding up Antifa members or Antifa adjacent or anyone included, then you're going to get the crack of it when it comes back to the other side. So there's that. But I don't want to leave this on a kind of a dour vibe. So let me try to share something again. Bum, bum, bum. We're going to share screens, guns.com. And we are sharing a screen from guns.com. So guns.com put up they posted something, what is it? Are, quote, blemished firearms a goodbye, question mark. Yes, guns.com, they are. Because here's the thing. First of all, I guess, put in there if you think blemished guns are a good buy or not. I love a deal on a gun, especially a blemished gun, because I have never, so I bought at least 2 lowers from PSA, stripped lowers, that were blims, that were $40 a piece, $30 a piece. I don't remember. So cheap, I bought 2 of them. That me and the guy at the gun shop who was doing the 4473, you know, because a strip lower is a firearm, according to our overlords, the retards. Anyway, the dog killers. We were looking at them, and we had a very hard press to find the blim. And I think, if I remember right, we found some like blemished kind of machining within like the magwell, where it was just chattered. Like it wasn't an even cut. Like the bit had kind of chattered or something, and so it created like an uneven look. But it was nothing, and it was painted. And it's like, yeah, I'll take that. But the bigger thing is like if somebody's like, oh no, I don't like a blemished gun. You know, I want my guns to look good. It's like, well, yeah, because you're not going to shoot them, you fud fuck. Like, everything over here, shot. You know, maybe it's not been shot a whole bunch. Like some of the shotguns, I'm just not a big shotgun shooter. But like, now, the Henry right there, I bought that I bought it from a widow, not going to lie. Okay? Paid like $200 for the thing. That's what she asked. I didn't Jew her down, okay? She asked, you know, could I get 200? And I said, yes, ma'am, gladly. Walnut stock, walnut foregrip. I have shot a lot of rounds through that Henry, but I'm going to be honest. I take it out. I don't set it in anything, and I shoot it, and I don't set it on the ground. I don't want to mess up that walnut stock. That's beautiful walnut on there, and I don't want to mess it up, okay? Now, take this right here is my Barrett AR, which, sticker price, MSRP was $2,000. I paid $1,200, 40% off. Who's the Jew now? Anyway, I'll throw that anywhere. It's marked up, beat up, what have you. I don't give a shit. Like, it just is what it is. That's the rifle. And it's beat up. Same with the Mini 14s, dinged up, busted up, knocked it around. Everything else, we're just going to run it. Now, I'm not like, I don't do the whole torture test thing like James Reeves does or used to do where you're throwing it and doing this. Like, I'm just using it the way I use it. Can it hold up to what I do? That's what I need to know. I don't need to know if it can be submerged and then frozen and then what it'll do, because I'm not going to do that. I don't live in the Arctic tundra. Now, if you're, skiing across Finland and you need to know a rifle is going to not jam up with ice, well, that comes down to the lube you use and the cleaners you use and the equipment you use on said gun. Okay, fair enough, but that's not me. So like a blemished gun, to me, like, it's gonna get blemished anyway. If I could save a few dollars, shit, yeah, dog, let's get that used car. I don't care when it gets a dent in it, because it already had a dent in it. So yeah, those of you that see this on the YouTubes, throw in the comments your favorite blemished gun or something. Like, do you like blemished guns? Don't you like blemished guns? I'll get in there and mix it up with y'all. But anyway, that is going to conclude Pirate Radio for this Friday night, February the 20th, 2026. I thank everyone who hung out, everyone who watches this or listens to it on the Spotifys, watches it on the YouTubes or the Rumbles, or even here on X and watches the replay. You guys are the best. Do not trust your life to a SIG pistol. And with that, y'all, take it easy. Stay safe. Peace.